Rangdo ume demi xidi da nganzu anjele kowe kowe ki gyuzo di nyomo batene ligo wara cheza nyomo ba je gyuzo di nane nyomo ba nane tsazo di denzi marik pa sia di res jesa da denzi marik pa di pangpala ane tongpa ni tope lo di komko go res jesa da tongpa ni tope lo di komko ba inza da tongpa ni tope lo di ya jeba chin to ni topa la kanes komko hori se jeba chera ko dos chine sungor jesa denza donalma shedi jesa chue tamje ane pa lu shaba zeng topi ki lu pa ming pa taba zama to rang wen de zhuba yo ma re se de andu sungora da di gora nganzu kisin de zo xu je den ma da do xu de ga re.
Good evening. We've been looking at, in our text, that the cause for us remaining bound in the suffering realms of samsara are our own afflicted minds. And our afflictions have as their root cause the ignorance of self-grasping. Having recognized then that it's this consciousness of ignorance that misapprehends how phenomena exist in reality is the cause of all our suffering, we can understand that its antidote is a mind that is contrary to it. The wisdom that understands reality, that understands how phenomena exist in reality. And as we cultivate this, we'll be able to eventually eradicate completely the afflictions together with their seeds and thereby attain liberation. Liberation from samsara, liberation from all the sufferings that beings experience. And this all comes about in dependence on coming to understand reality. Coming to understand, firstly, how phenomena appear, and then, after a process of analysis, come to recognize that they do not exist in the way they appear, but rather they exist merely labeled by mind.
Sherabje parodu chimba dini mingzamo dine didade sukshe jawa dini mizamo didade chowa dan dushe dan duje namda nambar sheba she jawa dini mingzamo shiribu didade pena da che jawa digi du ju megi da miksu medo se de donan badus chin sungorwa didade sherabje parodu chimba dini mingzamo se do.
Returning to the text, the middle of the first paragraph on page 18. Here we go. All these names are designated verbal conventions. When a bodhisattva, a great being, practices the perfection of wisdom, he does not subsequently view names as real. Not subsequently viewing them as real, he does not manifestly cling to them. Further, O Shariputra, when a bodhisattva, a great being, practices the perfection of wisdom, she sincerely thinks thus: this bodhisattva is only a name, this enlightenment is only a name.
Adidade sherabje parodu chimba dini mingzamo siri tangzo sherabje parodu chimba siri sherab sadi da tongpa ni tupe sherab sadi dele ku huare parodu chimba siri da parodu chimba la du anzu sanje ko phante la si hora sanje ko phante la do chimba chisan sanje ko phant thoba la ane karsyo din tongpa ni tupe sherab di nyamso no sherab nyamso lemba la tene ane parodu chimba siri sanyokopa topo hore saji to sungorwa.
In what has just been read out, the term perfection of wisdom is utilized. So wisdom then refers to the wisdom that realizes reality, the wisdom that understands reality or knows reality. And perfection literally is gone beyond. So it refers to having completely transcended the suffering realms of samsara and led to, and then the state of Buddhahood has been attained. And how so? Through the cultivation of wisdom, through the training in wisdom. So this then is the meaning of the term perfection of wisdom.
파로도 침발에도 파로도 침바 파쇼를 파조아래서 야시고 파로도 침바 데 딜레도 는 파로도 침발에도 다 술을 지고 고 슈라 슈리아 술을 데네 파조아래는 마도 조사데네 고르와 조사데 가와레스네 디슈라 카로도 파로도 침발에도 가와네 파로도 침발에도 술을네 파로도 침발에서 술을 그래서는 코와레 코위에 둥하는 코위에 the Kovadida Suresha. Chisa Tombanyi Tubi, Sherab Gombala, Dene, and a Kovi Dunga Tadale, Dreje, Drene, and Ya Sanji Gomato, Parasanji Gomala, Ya Drovare, such. That the knowledge this way, part of the Chimba, said you. Is not Suredi, and to Kovi Dunga, Dele, Drojen, and the Gawadore, said you. The Paro Dele Suru, Kovi, Kovadi Suresha. 디 파로디안에 만족에 탈바 탐지게 받고 봐. 데려야 좋아래 에서지고 그래.
This term gone beyond, if one was to translate it more literally, it would be gone beyond to over there. So gone beyond to over there, this term, we usually translate this as perfection, which would mean attaining the perfected state. But here again, let's explaining it literally, which is gone beyond to over there, which shows that there is a dependent relativity between two places, here and there, over here and over there, because to have arrived over there, to have gone beyond, means you have come from somewhere. So where are these, what are these 2 points? Well, the over there, we've already mentioned, is the gone beyond, is that it's the attainment of the state of Buddhahood or nirvana, and where has one come from? That would be the suffering realms of samsara. So one has gone beyond the sufferings of samsara, or sometimes translated as transcended the sufferings of samsara, and has arrived at the state of Buddhahood.
가와네 침바레라도 조사지 시험으로 가와네 근데 가와바도 침바레세 지나다 근데 가와네 라면도 코비 추르디 가래 추르 코비 코와네 자 조아래 가와 조아래스네 야 상지 코비 동화 타달래 빵배 빵바 탈바이 고방래 조아래세 간스 조아래 람나 람냠렌진 동방이 되게 셔럽 공발래 때네 조아래세 지금 동방이 되게 셔럽 공발래 때네 조아래 에스네 디고고르마 지당할 때는 마 멜론 조아래스네 가와네 결혼면은 벤디고는 마 조아인세 조사디 ngazu ngosu tsikongsu tanga melon draw in se shigyo mato drosa de shigyo ma ine shula drosa jyor wada ani shula kichi de kyo gawan draw sen Bendigo draw de sa ani ganes draw de sen ani moda tan draw ani ril na draw de sa jyor wada ani moda odanga ril na draw in se indina jire gawane gawa draw de lan kowi dunga le ta kowa le kowi ne dele ani ta je ya sanje sala ya draw de sa ganes draw de sa 동바 인도에 셔러 공발했던 조아래 사실 제가 디 don달에 디 숨고래 셔러게 바로도 침바 세야디 don다 된데 시고라.
This term then, in English we usually translate as the perfection of wisdom, or we could maybe now translate it all more literally, the wisdom that has gone beyond to over there. This is quite a short term, but it has an extensive meaning. So when you hear something has gone beyond to over there, immediately questions can come to mind. For example, where have you gone to? From where have you come? And by what means did you travel? So if you hear, for example, that someone's gone to Melbourne, you think, I wonder where they went from and how they got there. So they may have gone from Bendigo by train or car to Melbourne. So just a short statement has far more meaning to it. So here, when you take the term perfection of wisdom, or more literally, the wisdom that's gone beyond to over there, this shows that it has gone from somewhere, the suffering realms of samsara, and has arrived or attained the state of perfection, the state of Buddhahood. And how so? Through perfecting or developing wisdom, the wisdom realizing emptiness.
자다 먼저되네 셔르게 파르도 심바세도 어느쪽이 80주 셔도 셔르게 84세고 셔르게 80 지나다 되나네 셔르게 파르도 심바세라로 디 셔르게 파르도 심바세야디 먼저 80주 나게시도 진바 수준수바 준수선데 셔르게 80도 셔르게 84세 셔르게 84세도 동요도 불러들어와.
This explanation then of this term we translate in English as perfection, or gone beyond to over there. I've been referring it to, as with our text here, the perfection of wisdom. But you know there are 5 other perfections, and the explanation would follow to all 5 other perfections. And so it's through training in these perfections, that's the method, or in these techniques, whether it's from generosity to the wisdom realizing emptiness, that one transcends the suffering realms of samsara, arrives at the perfected state of Buddhahood.
지나다가 저기 남녀 셔칭이 80세야디 나 80주 셔리 80세야디 장주 심기 심비게 동방이 또 별로 될 거고와 지나 셔지 80세 지나다 델리아 셔리 바로도 침바 라면도 델리아 고당으로 제시 잡탄 이용고래 바로도 침바라도 조사와시거와 근데 딜라면도 가로 보선 상지 규기 동방이 또 베셔럽텔라 셔리 80세 가시게 제시 잡탄라 셔신 80라도 상지 법이 규기 동방이 또 베셔럽텔라 셔시 80 셔리 80 다그레스 당한저 전주심바 줄로 동유도 베셔라셔와 델라 셔리 80 다그 말레스 셔리 80이 냠는 다그레스 냠는다 지금 도보르지 냠는지 고서 탈치요 말레스 지나 바로도 치요 말레스 그 진을 두고 어레스다 전주심바 동방이 또 베셔럽디 고유 동을 타요 말와 빵차요 말 고유 동아 규녀 뭐바 차상 빵 마차와이자 그 두고를 남갈 마스는 조심바 갑레 지나 셔리 파르도 침발라기 말레스 셔라 파지 냠는 라기레스 지나 셔라 파르도 침발라면도 되니 고유 동아 가서 녀모바 차상 빵차와 바샤데 제 빵차와들 고고레스 제대로 그 빵차와 거나 상이 동방이도 베셔라들라 셔신 파지레스 디나신 당한저 80주 진비에 80 수제에 80 수입에 전제에 83대 셔르에 80주 샤르도 다디 디나신 제시 개관디기 잡탄디기 제바나 80주대 상지 규기 진비에 냠네 수제냐나 수배냐나 전에님 셔르냐나 주들라 80주 라그레스 장주심비 규기 냠네 제 진비에 80 수준 80 진비에 80년 냠네 수준이 80 냠네 세자고레스 마도 80 라그 말레스 제시 개관디 제두 지고레 송고래 제시 겹다 찍으래 다 제시 겹다 니어디 나한테 찍디 디래다
What's not explicitly stated, but one knows, is that a practice that is called a perfection, or one that has gone beyond, whilst it may be a practice of, in this instance, wisdom or any of the others, is also conjoined with bodhicitta, which means it has as its final destination the result of bodhicitta, the attainment of the state of enlightenment. Then there are 2 alternative explanations for this term perfection, or gone beyond to over there. There are 2 different explanations. So one is that the state of gone beyond or perfection exists only in the continuum of an Arya Buddha. So therefore, only an Arya Buddha has perfected their wisdom, or their wisdom has been developed to the point where it's gone beyond the continuum of a being in samsara to a being on the far shore, a being who has attained Buddhahood. And that is because, according to this one presentation, that it's because only an Arya Buddha has completely abandoned the seeds of the afflictions as well as their stains, that it is only a Buddha who has wisdom that is perfected or transcendent or has gone beyond. And all bodhisattvas, they are training in the perfections, but they haven't yet perfected their wisdom and so forth. So there are these two. There are two ways to explain this. There are two ways to say who has the perfection, a perfection, and this is one of them. That a perfection only exists in the continuum of a Buddha, because it's only a Buddha who has completely eradicated the seeds and afflictions. Bodhisattvas, they are training in the perfections, or they're training in going beyond. So that was one of the two explanations. So it really is a case of gone beyond. Because gone beyond indicates that the destination has been attained. The practitioner has attained their result and are now a Buddha. And only therefore in the continuum of a Buddha are the consciousnesses of generosity, ethics, and so forth perfected or transcendent or have gone beyond.
나 대신 잡나 지기 가르친 거라서네. ene 바로 그 침바 라비도 인지민지 편이 바로 랩 살고 보고 말했어. 제가 바로 그 침바라도 그 진비가 산지 고방 토비치도 장주심 육군이 나제 동반이 공미비 동반이 싫어대야 바로 침바 최고래. 침바에 편이려고 말했어. 배는 알아서 된마 저게 멜론 드로바이나 된마 남간마 강번에 된 차지 뭐라당 누구는 그 멜론의 조선 라이거로와 어때 맨일레 여러분은 레빙해 봐요 말와 제가 된마 조선 라이도 찍을 말려와 제 용을에 차와 제 용을에 찍을 남가로 조심 봐 용을에 이내 되는 게보다 니가라 바로도 멜론을 좋아하셔야지 된다데 민디 비슷한 거로 와제 디나시 곧 장주심 육군에라데 동반이 산지고방 토비 칠도 안에 가지고 지금 동반이 공명되는 고비 동반이 공명되는 되니 동반이도 공비 전주선비 공비 동반이도 별로디 공별로디 시라게 바로 신발해서 편일랩 사회에서는 레요 말해서 이나고 조 냠내 조 남가로 조신비 까브레스 제 바로 신바스 편일랩 산에 바로 신발해 제가 바로 신바되어 고야 되라 냠내 대파 곰신은 야 냠내 제신비 내가 지다 판이 냠는 제산 타투 올려두게 니가라 바로 뒤침바서 찍고 그래. 또나 고쳐 그래서 고쳐반자 전주선비기 파신주기 냠는 데야 파신레스. 전주선비기 동방이도 비셔라다 셔레 파신레. 상계 법비기 동방이도 비셔라다 셔레 파신레. 세상 전주선비기 진배 냠는 데야 진배 파신레. 안에다지 상위기 진배 파신레. 제가 된디기 제시 잡나 되게 삼당나 제시 잡나 파신주기 장주선비 규례야 파신주기 요래 상위 규례 요래 직발해서 요바 니가 요래서 어저시 잡다 직티샤고래.
The second way of explaining this word would be that, well, in the first it was very clearly gone beyond over there. So it's referring to a being who has attained their destination. The second way of explaining would, rather than saying gone beyond, would say going beyond. Because the second way of explaining the term would include all bodhisattvas as well as Buddhas. So all those who are either training in generosity, ethics, and so forth, conjoined with bodhicitta, as well as those who have completed their training and have attained the fifth path of no more training. Their wisdom conjoined with bodhicitta is also called a perfection, as are the bodhisattvas who are training in generosity up to wisdom. All of theirs are called perfections, although they are in the process of being perfected or going beyond or transcending. So therefore there are these two ways to explain the term that we usually say perfection of, generosity, etc. Either in the first explanation that it only exists in the continuum of Buddhas, but bodhisattvas are training in the perfections of, whereas the second explanation is it's called a perfection or a transcendent generosity or wisdom and so forth, from the attainment of bodhicitta right through to the attainment of Buddhahood.
Geshe Thubten Rabten samtang kha cha dura Geshe Thubten Rabten da dinege namza jingan zu Gabriel ya mo ba na khan zu ge dinege ha ji ge peche ji shung shan da ji da bai na ane okashina le shere ye parchin tu de sanji kule sanji ma to jensim kule yo mare se ku re Gabriel ya ane janju semba sanji kule yo re se de da dingi de gawa re do was tungmi do Geshe Thubten 가서 퉁미데 배 가와를 찍대 배고 가와를 차고로 봐 세상 가와를 섬네 제사디 제시 겹타디 곧 삼당하디 가가라 차 진짜 제시 겹타 가가 차마도 안디 니스디 근데 다디 미 주셔반데 되네게 좀 엄바나 아직 데네시 통선반 어다딘 삼다 디기 제시 겹타 삼나 데네시잖아 제시 겹고래 디기 삼다나 제시 겹타 삼나 데네다나 겹고레스 어제사디 고 제시 겹타 두스 카가레마 데네시 해setwe 니스다 세와고루와.
I think there's benefits in you understanding that there are two different explanations coming from two different ways of understanding the term. So some do say that the term wisdom that has gone beyond can only exist in a perfected being, a transcendent being within a Buddha. So all five perfections can only be found in the continuum of a Buddha. Others, though, will say that no, this term gone beyond can also mean going beyond. Therefore, the perfections can and do exist in the continuum of bodhisattvas as well as Buddhas. So it's good to be clear on this, because if I were just to give an abbreviated presentation and just give one explanation, the one I'm more comfortable with perhaps, then you may read in a book another explanation and a doubt will arise, thinking that, oh, these are two different explanations, one must be right, one must be wrong. That's not necessarily the case. Just from a different way of thinking, there are two different explanations to which beings have a perfection in their continuum or not.
Nyamlen lago shira ye parchin yasin ming dago mare karasene shira ye parchin nyamlen da parchin sedu semjen tamje sangyo go ba tobi chirdu janju simgi simbi thone nyamlen jeagi jimbada churin soba nyamlen jeba dela ane parchin sedi ming dago re nyamlen sedi yaji janju simgi masin bige da jimbada churin soba chunre samde nyamlen dongyu do be shira nyamlen jega yorwa deso an jimbe nyamlen churin sobe nyamlen chunre dongyu do be shira nyamlen sedi shira nyamlen se jawa mato ane parchin se tsikti de jago mare.
And the different ways of thinking that lead to these two different explanations are that, in terms of the first, only a being who has completed their training and thereby have perfected their training can be said to have a perfection. Or to be more literal, only those who can be said to have gone beyond and attained their goal of Buddhahood can say they have a transcendent wisdom or transcendent generosity. The other way of thinking is that because these practices are conjoined with bodhicitta, which has as its goal the attainment of enlightenment, because therefore when one engages in a practice of generosity or ethics or wisdom and so forth, conjoined with bodhicitta, that merit will result in the attainment of Buddhahood. Therefore, that consciousness is suitable to be called a perfection right now, even though the continuum is yet to be perfected. So that's the thinking behind the two different explanations. So maybe just to say it again. So some will say that only a Buddha can be said to have gone beyond, and therefore to have a perfection of wisdom or wisdom that's gone beyond. It's only a Buddha who's attained a perfected state. Others will say, because the training in generosity and so forth are all conjoined with bodhicitta, therefore, even though it may only be in the continuum of a bodhisattva, the goal is Buddhahood. So therefore, this practice, which is creating the causes that will eventually lead to enlightenment, it's fine to now already call it for example, a perfection of wisdom or a transcendent wisdom or a wisdom that has gone beyond, because that is the result of this training.
지난 주로를 세딩 아주 코비 타트 코발이 이거라. 주로 8월 세도 코발을 주에 탈바되라고 원래. 지난 주로 8월 세대. 주로 8월 주로 세도 코발이지. 근데 8월 세도 코 빵비 빵바 탈바세. 지난 디네기 주로 8월 세도 8월 탈바디 매니 년도당 탈바도 여러 주로 8월 세죠래. 이나 다딩은 주게 셰디 태버침비게 남냠링이 림베 냠네 셰가 변자 8월 세디 8월도 침바 세디 거기 동화 녀모바 바샤단 제바 빵네 빵바 탈도 받아 8월 탈도 8월데라 8월 세디 거기 동화를 위해 탈바샤 탈바데나라야 탈바데라양 네 탈바데라 니 차고로 받아 저는 녀모바 사본다 제바 빵비 탈바지다 녀모 바사ben 바샤다 제바 빵비 탈바세데 제가 다들 한쪽에 녀모 바샤다 제바 빵비 바샤다 제바를 줘비게 탈 델레 탈바지 안지 기시고로 봐.
This term gone beyond, this can often be found in the context of practitioners of the hero or solitary realizer lineage, so Tibetan practitioners who are striving to go beyond samsara to the attainment of the state of liberation. So in English there we'll always find the term gone beyond, but it is the same term that is being translated here as perfection. In the context though of the Mahayana Dharma with bodhisattvas, then this term that could be translated as gone beyond, but here is translated as perfection, means going beyond samsara, but to the attainment of liberation, which is enlightenment, complete Buddhahood. And this refers to where not only the afflictions and their seeds have been abandoned, but the stains too have been abandoned. Practitioners of the first type, who strive to go beyond samsara and attain liberation, heroes and solitary realizers, they only strive to abandon the afflictions together with their seeds. Bodhisattvas, they have their goal as enlightenment, therefore they need to completely abandon every fault. So not just afflictions and their seeds, but also their stains or imprints. These too need to be abandoned. Moreover, in both contexts, whether the practitioner is a hero or solitary realizer, or whether the practitioner is a bodhisattva, one may read that they have as a goal liberation. And this is because the term liberation can refer to the goal of individual liberation, or the liberation which is Buddhahood. So the same term can be used in different contexts to have very different meanings.
Sheraja Paruda Shimbadi means a more Angele, Tomba to be Janju Simbi Simbeda, Sangi, Janju Simbi Sugu, Chivananga, Angele, Tomba to be Lodigi, Janju Simbi Simbi, Tomba to be Lodigi, and the Carto Horsene, Che Kantoya de Kangla Tuba Rangun to be Tomba Tugor, Wada, Tomba Tugor, Rangun to be Tomba Tugor. The Tomba Tobaza, Tomba Yutoba, Tomba to Locrone. Rang Kola Yorwa Rangun Dubashi Rebelana, Diamares or the Mingzamres, Tomba to Lokora Shira Coronia, Mingzamre, the Mingzamre, Laviodum, Chig Mingzamre, the Mingzamres, a Chigrela Rova. Some said Chig Marela Gorda, Mareka Gorba, some said Mingzamre, the Lupa, Tabasam Mato, Tomba to Lokoroyan, Madkala Matuba, Rangun Duba Yomare, such. Then that is Mingzam, said Tomba to be Sheraja Pardo Chimba Dini Mingzam was Tomba to be Sheraja Passion Coronia, Coronga Tomba Rangun Madu Tomba Tuguarde, Corona Rangun Duba Rebel and Mare, Corona Jena, Kalama Rangun to be Tombares, Joseph Mingzam Taba, Mingzam Lupa, Taba some re, like do, and Kalama Rangun to be Yomare, Secorona Yomare said, Shula, done the good.
Where we see in the text here, this perfection of wisdom is only a name. Here from this we understand that the perfection of wisdom is referring to the wisdom realizing emptiness. And what is it that phenomena are being realized to be empty of? And that is that they exist by way of their own inherent or natural existence, or by way of their own essence, or from their own side. So phenomena are empty of existing from its own side. And the consciousness that realizes that is in accordance with reality, so it's a wisdom. And this is the wisdom realizing emptiness. So this is what we can understand immediately from the term perfection of wisdom, knowing that wisdom means the wisdom realizing emptiness, and that phenomena are empty of existing from their own side, or by way of their own essence or nature or characteristic. But then the line continues. The perfection of wisdom is only a name. So this indicates that whilst phenomena are empty of existing by way of their own nature, they exist though merely or only or just labeled by mind. So it's merely a label being imputed or designated by mind. That is how phenomena exist, but not by way of their own nature.
Ming Zam Re, La Zam Ming Zam Re, La de Shenchilla Dune Pal, Crescent Lue Pa Dama, Dapa Zamji, Shenchilla Dune Juptivare, Dune Yedipare Madon, Ja Ming Zam Re, Shenchilla Dune Palo, Dapa Zamji, Yore S. Google, Yore Legorva. Shenchilla Dune Lue Dapa Zam Yore Lavio. Shella Matu Badi, Yomare says, don't get to go to war. Go it.
This term mere, it implies, or it carries the connotation, the meaning, that something is dependent. In this case, a mere name, dependent on imputation by mind, that the name is merely imputed or labeled by mind. And therefore, it is dependent, not independent or not self-existent. Because this is how phenomena appear to us, as being self-existent. But here, when it's said that it is merely a name, this implies that it is dependent on labeling, dependent on imputation, and therefore cannot be self-existent.
Parle fa taba zamre sido jena denenza dangan zuge ko dadi denje gi di ni sheora polu shenchi la dune an le pa de le ming taba zam shenchi la dune taba zamre sido dan ngan zu shera je paro de jimba se di Mingdi and Kanishile Tagore, Laviodu, Tisa, the Yigan to Chepachidigo, you can't like Tuba Nawan, Kalama Rangun to Nawa Nashi, Nawa the Duge Midu, Chepachide, Kansam Chilia, Anzulia, Kalama Rangun to Badi, Mindu Sempigi, Rangun to be Tombadi, Nyonsam Rixam Chick, Nyonsam Rixam Chick, Hakoazam Chick, Nyonsam Rixam Satcher. Just a young some Kalama do Chepache, Kalama Rangun to be Tomba, Tonsan, Mindu Sempigi. Nyong Rixam Chiligorwa. Deniki Rixam, Deniki della Lui Casur, Sheraji Parut Shimba said, Del Mintagor, then Nyonsam, Denicala Madio Ram to be Tombe, Tonsa de Nyonsam, Rixam della, and the bar Lui Mazumika della Sheraji Parut Shimba said, that do sin Sheraji, Sherap said, Tomba to be Sherap said, Lui Vadella Sherap said, Mintagor, which is a Sherap said, Dagorwa. Nyonsa Rixam, so to ha Gozam Zero, the how Chadi. Nyonsam Rixam City, the Niki Chepachi, the Kalama Rangun to the Mindu Sampigi, Aguanjiorvada, Della, Dizam Mother Shana Goma, Kalama Rangun to the Mindu Samp, Dira Hago, Dizam Hago. Dihagoje, Yongsam said, Rixam said, Dithagoden. Denechilla, and Anzugi, Sharp said, Tombain to Lua said, Corpa Lupa Tabarwa, the negative Tombain to a dealer that Tombain to shut up Direta, Samping Anzupa, Luti Patagorwa. There was a Yungur, what is Rigur, how going, Delanzo that don't to be shut up Dire said by Lupa Tagorwa. Denegi Noegi Rixam Corona under Rangun to Baris Marco Yule Tugora, Kalama the Rangun to be Tombadi, Tombadi la Tugore, di Tomba Yobanza, Quadrigor, Tomba Mena Horigum, Tomba della Tene Ripa, the Yu della Tene Ripa Sachawore. The Yu Diang and the Riken Gaza Mena, Lord Mena, Yu Sasham, Corona Yu the Nigala Tuna to the water, Matuba the Yamadi Chawore. Rigba said, Tomba to be Rig Lodian, Sul Tugos, Toy Udil Tugor, Udimena Toy Omarwa, Coripa Yongo, Udi Latine, Tonsam Tomba Ni de Latine, and call Udi, Rigore. Jesa, Ripulodian, round when you do your Marcala, Mateo do your Mare, you Latine to Gores, Udila, Tugores, you Tomba in la Tugore. Jesa, Udi Tuba, Udi Rigor Mado, Udi Ripa Charmado, Udi Mena Ripa Chayamarwa. Jesa, Ripa Chabate, Udila Tugores, Udila Tugores.
This term mere, then we understand, or when we read this, it reminds us that the phenomenon exists merely as a dependent arising, particularly dependent on imputation by mind or dependent on labeling by mind. So how does this work then in the context of the perfection of wisdom? So the term perfection of wisdom immediately will make us think of emptiness. So as we know then, or to come to realize emptiness, one takes any object, comes to recognize firstly how it appears to consciousness, then investigates to see if it exists in the way that it appears or not, and comes to realize that it does not. So this is a mere knowing, a mere experience that one comes to. So just to say as an aside, can I introduce some new terms here, which come between the realizing of emptiness and the labeling, the recognizing, the realizing of emptiness and the realizing of dependent arising. It comes in between here. So first, any phenomenon that one calls to mind, sees how it appears, then investigates to see if it exists in this way or not, and realizes it's empty of existing in the way that it appears. And this one merely knows, one merely experiences. That's all. Thereafter, one recognizes that the phenomenon, though, does exist. It's not that it's non-existent. It exists merely labeled by mind. There has to realize have come to this point now between the realization of when one realizes emptiness, when one merely knows, merely experiences, to know something. So this is the word in awareness and knowers is translated as knower. So here we say know, but to know something means there has to be an object. So it's not that it's non-existent and something is experienced. There needs to be an object too. But it doesn't exist in the way that it appears. It exists dependent on labeling by mind.
Dida shera ya paru do chiba di mingza mo la so dida de su she jawa di mingza mo ji san suk se de ko pa ji ge shen ji le due ne pa le pa ming da ba zam ji re da ba zam re se de chen shen ji le due ne da ba zam re se ko da zam se de shen ji le due ne da ba zam re se dian ji shen ji le due ne zhu ba de xi go re da shen ji le due ne da ba zam re se due ne zhu ba ming da zam ji ba yi na da 짬세디 가르치고서는 셴라 마드바 숙지 요 말에 세우로 다다가지 셴라 마드바 숙지 요 말에 세우로 던다 디스고 거다 제산 수코로 라신 유튜브 랑원 유튜브 동바레 세디 던라 디고 거래 수디 민자모스 수디 랑팔 셴지라 되네 팔레 따바점지레 라비어도 수디 강라이 마도 랑원 유튜브 동바레 세디 고 거다.
Continuing to look at the text, this bodhisattva is only name, this enlightenment is only a name, this perfection of wisdom is only a name. And it continues, these forms are only names. So the process is the same, no matter what the object is, in this case, form. So we see here that these forms are only names, or this term only is also can be translated as merely. So these forms are only names, these forms are merely names. So this means that they are being merely names or only names. This implies they are dependent. They are not self-existent or independent, but they are dependent on labeling by mind. So they are not independent. In this form is not independent, but is rather dependent. It is not self-existent, but dependent on labeling by mind.
Dina jinji bar da din ma chowa se da du she number she ba se she jawa din mi zam mo se de chowa lam ne ra du she lam na du number she ba kan de shi ne de su cha san dan ji shen ji la due ne pa le ming pa da ba zam yu ba ma do an shen ji la ma due ba rang wen de de dong ba le se de an du chen de da ji ba da ji cha san.
And the same with how it continues. These feelings, discriminations, compositional factors, and consciousnesses are only names or are merely names. So these two then, we recognize that they are not self-existent. They do not exist in the way they appear. They are empty of doing so, but rather, or moreover, they are dependent on labeling by mind. So when we see merely a name or only a name, this implies that it is dependent on labeling by mind. And this is the case not just with form, but with the other aggregates too.
그 민잠지리 사실 고도에 마도 돈달이야 롤이야 하는 저기 지게 지 소화 시우진 연보질리 두고 말봐 네가 마두바디 가서네 디 내든 닝보디 하 먹으러 와다 다 닝보 하고 직지리 민잠모 라요나 남사 안지게 소화야 강라 또또 말랑면에 두비 동바리 사지 리두고 와다.
When you read something like this, this bodhisattva is only a name, this enlightenment is only a name, or this perfection of wisdom is merely a name, these forms are merely names, and so forth. When you read something like this, or we hear an explanation about something existing merely as a name, probably not much of a feeling arises within oneself, or it doesn't mean that much to us. But that is just because we've yet to come to experience the deeper meaning of this. We've yet to come to gain and experience that phenomena exist merely labeled by mind. When that is well known, and that is well understood, or we've gained experience of that, these words carry a vastly different meaning.
가위게 소화 숙침불에도 디겐제네 미시당 외르지요. 나나 가브리엘야 양직 마허베 강하게 동하게 되는게 숙침불에도 디겐제 미실에 지은 거로 받으면 양 정도 남이 제데 디안에서 가가는.
When one has a dream, feelings may well arise about what the objects that one is dreaming of. And in dependence on those strong feelings, one may either experience great joy in one's mind or great sadness. One may even cry in one's sleep. And what is happening is this joy or great sadness comes about in dependence on feelings arising in relation to the object.
Gabriele temora tavina temo pe kyondo khobra pe kangage nam temora ta de ngani bin temo zumar wasro de ina ha go guglia man du stede chik du chin tat pe temo pinta de namsa de negi temo kanga de pe chik le de thoa temo thoa de gala ane Gabriele mishute mugema buli do temo dana la chisa pe di temo zuma yimba da ha go de ina de negi ta Gabriele sem di pa unerang 디 직 강하디 오늘은 신금을 디 주말에 삼나지 매래 다 오늘은 현재 안디지도 초월이야 저게 초원은 보실래야 돼 디지네 미슈다 리오로 봐.
And dreams, of course, it's not any form of reality appearing to us. But even in our waking state, we make the self-same mistake. When we are absorbed in a good film, or when you're absorbed in a good film, we're being swept along by the story, and strong emotion arises within us. We may feel quite joyous or cry. Of course, after we recognize, that was just a story, it was make-believe. But whilst we are watching and we are absorbed in the story, what it was appearing to us, it appeared as true or real, and we grasp at it as existing in the way that it appears. Hence these strong feelings, very real feelings, arise within us.
디나시 동반이 뭐니 대해기 두샤 동반이 된 룸위기 두샤 지어로 받아 두샤래는 최송사 두샤 세우로 받아 하고서 먼저 둘자세 좋아 둘자 지당 되는 여러 봐 남미기 최선의 두자주로 봐 제가 동반이 시세기 두자 동반이 되게 두쇠당 따따 레드게 두쇠 따따 레드게 동반이 되게 두자 동반이 되는 지도게 뇌도 룸웨게 두자사지 동반이 되는 뇌도 룸웨 두자들라 간스요르스는 동반이세 땀디 또 동반이 그 땀디 퇴어되네 베라미 미슈다 지리레스 밀리아 베직 다 미슈 코르게 다 안스 수본 중앙 저기 Lugi Babodike, Shena de Jungo, Andinaj, Lugi Babodon, Mine Chimachuala, Jungres. Cizan di that Tony Degi, new to Ruma to Jedi, Telemason, Tata Lady, Cizan Delia, Tony Tempen, Tony Gaboto to go, Cizan, Tony Tempe, new to Ruma to Jedila, or Dennis Jungres, Sungtua.
When students who are receiving teachings on emptiness, when they have gone through a particular amount of training and are really suitable vessels for this teaching, what is being presented to them will match with will meet their own experience, and without any control, they will burst into tears. The hair on their body will stand up. And this is come about in dependence on the teaching, on emptiness, and their own prior cultivation of emptiness.
Lu, Tanganzo Pumbong Atisha or Suki Pumbong number she Pumbong about tea. That means I'm re Shangela Dune, Jubare, Shangela Dune, Palu, Tabatsum Yore, Sidu, that Galama to rang when you do about your mares. That Galama to rang when you do about Yobaina, Niema, the Yoba Nashin, Shansujan Dugo Mare, and you are your mare, you are down to your mares, rang when you do about Yobaina. You are dry your mare. Rangyua Tang and two mares. Could you draw a man you are down to your marava? Chesan Kala Mato Bangal to Sukda, Pumbonga body, rang when you droop the Baina, and you are dry your mares, and you are Karchina to come Yamna Karchemin, you are down to your mares. Chesan Taco Kala Mato rang when Majuba is a Shangela Dune, Juba in Zang, would you are dry your res? Chesan you are dry over in Zang. Juge Samlodi, Mazu that Yomobe Wangi, Court Yomobe Ching, Jekanga Jebadi, Pashenchile Dine, Com, Yamden Chepaletine, Kojuataje, Tabat Timji Bovata, Rotugores, Jesa Dinenza, Juge Rashin, Maduba in the Chen, Mazu Sim Rashin tribute, Tomba in the Dinigo Tomba de Mazule Sangi Rigores, Jesa Sangi Salatoy Rixen, and Nubadida, Sabon Mason Yodebares, Jesa Dinenza, and Dinigi. Yamlen Chepalatine, Sanjuko Mato, two rays, Tanganzuki Dondala, that Tombayung also Tempiki di Dunlama and two Sene, Chasan, and the Chikanzuki, Com Yamlen Chepaina, and Nazu Yargi Yoba, Nazu Yomo Bang, Tugu Yoba, Yomo Nimbotin Tugu Yoba, Dinyam Chepalatine, and Tarbat Temchikimo, top Tugu Yoba, Dadana Nazugula, the nigger Tobeg, seven mason of Yodibadi, that day Dinma.
This term that this expression we've had here so many times in this quotation, that phenomena such as forms are only names or merely names, it's important to reflect on. And we included in this meditation on emptiness, starting with an object to see how it appears, then investigating to see if it does exist in this way or not. We recognize that it's empty of existing in this way that it appears. It's not self-existent or existing by way of its own nature, independent of anything at all, but is dependent on being merely labeled by mind. And this is the case for all phenomena. And we've had a long list of them mentioned here. So if we take, for example, our form aggregates or our various mental aggregates, all of them are empty of being self-existent, but it doesn't mean that they are non-existent, but exist merely in dependence on being labeled by mind. And this is of great importance. Because if phenomena did exist in the way they appeared, if the way they appeared was true, if they were truly existent, if the way that they existed were true, the way they appeared was how they existed, that would mean they were independent. This is how they appear. They don't appear as if something that has come about in dependence on a vast array of causes, has multiple parts, and is changing and in flux, and requires imputation by mind. This is not how things appear. Things appear as being solid, inflexible, true. And if they existed in this way, they would be unchanging. They could never change because they were independent. Whatever causes they encountered would have no impact on them because they are independent of causes. So, if that's how phenomena existed, development would not be possible. Nothing that exists in this way could improve or decline. But as everything that exists merely labeled by mind, it therefore can change, independent on causes. So that means liberation is possible, enlightenment is possible. And it is possible for sentient beings due to having our own Buddha potential, Buddha nature. Because we have this potential to become Buddhas, enlightenment can be attained. And this is something that's important to reflect on. We could say the consequences of phenomena not existing in the way they appear, but as existing as dependent arisings. That consequence is we have the capacity to transform ourselves. All the faults that we perceive, we have the power to eradicate. All the good qualities we long to develop, we have the power to develop these within ourselves because of our Buddha potential, our Buddha nature.
다세 마링 바디 곰발레 동방이 또 베셔로 곰발레 때네 디바빵 투구요 바다 괜세 투구요 바다 하고요도 괜세 투구요 바다 하고 봐인자 셴 동의 내비 셈잘이야 니지 하고도 기그리스 근데 저기 뒤로 셈제 지민이 지 추천부 날마 자디버는 안도 되게 탑람지기 여바 탑람지 탑시에나 어다딩 에디 등에서베 저기 뒤되게 셈슈디 첼리르와 되게 탑람 균에면은 아닌지에서 다 되마도 제가요 말고 곧된마 셈슈 첼레디가요 말 탑람은 어다딩 에지긴 셈 탑람지 탑람 여반 탑람 될랬더니 바 스테이트에 여러 디나시 곧 동반이 또 어디 땡진 되어 줘 대사 땡진 되어 또 동யம் 현지를 되네 요모바티게 현 람 곰발에 되네 요모바 세투바에 통요도 아니 현리아 현유 동화세야 닝도데 라버 쳐와지 닝도 라버려 닝지되게 라버도 폐야 용거래 제래 안디나신다 다심전 산지고보 토베디야 다 동방이 또 어디 현지를 되네 남년에 제발 산지고보 토기베 탑람디 배 약고지가 하고 봐자 탑람디 여바 하고요도 델야 토베야 탑람디 베수 숙체지도 그래 닝도 라버도 게로 그래서 제가 잠니지 고미하다 장시였음 공발아야 라버도 아니 지키 닝도 라버게 와다 장시였음 비 라버도 지키 숙체다다 닝도 장시였음 잠니지디게 라버도 숙체다도 그래 제가 동반이 공백이 동반이 또 봐이나 내내기 차상 냠내 제알이야 아니 닝도 라버도 페도 그래 근데 진짜 디나지나 진배 냠내도 추정님 쇠배 냠내 냠내 가리네다 냠내디야 숙체다도 그래 제래
So all the objects that are mentioned here in this paragraph, such as what we've just seen here, the 5 aggregates of form and feeling and so forth, all of these you can take as objects of meditation because every phenomenon appears to us as being self-existent. When we investigate, we recognize that it's empty of existing in this way. We come to a mere experience, a mere knowing of this. We then recognize, but it still exists, merely labeled by mind. And through engaging in this meditation repeatedly on a variety of objects, we come to gain confidence that this root cause of all our suffering, the ignorance of self-grasping, can be eradicated. I've not only I now recognize the cause of my suffering, but I'm also seeing that its antidote, the wisdom realizing emptiness, I can understand this and cultivate it within myself. And that gives us tremendous confidence that we ourselves can gain freedom from all our suffering. But not only that, everyone here has a disposition to becoming a bodhisattva, to developing the paths of the Mahayana Dharma within oneself. This wisdom realizing emptiness is a powerful technique that aids the development of love and compassion and bodhicitta. Because through first intellectually understanding, that is the ignorance of self-grasping and all its resulting afflictions that keep us suffering, and thereafter, that is the wisdom realizing emptiness that eradicates that, and then gaining experience of the validity of these two formerly mere intellectual views, now gaining experience of this, we get a great strength of mind. And this strength of mind gives us confidence not only that freedom is possible for ourselves, but so too for each and every sentient being. So if one imagines oneself on, say, a riverbank and one's observing a being drowning, of course compassion will arise within us. But if we feel powerless, there's nothing that we can do. Okay? Compassion is there, but we're not acting on it. We can't swim. The mobile phones aren't working. We have nothing to throw to them. What can we do? But if we have developed a great strength of mind, and through that confidence and strength of mind develop varying skills, we will know that others are no different from me. Not only do they long for a lasting, stable happiness like I do, but the causes that keep them bound in suffering, in particular ignorance, it's the same as my own. All sentient beings need is a skilled guide who can guide them perfectly in accordance with their own unique karmic predispositions and their own unique personality, guide them in adopting virtuous minds and eliminating non-virtuous minds. What they desperately need is a guide. And I can become that guide. I've understood that I can eradicate all faults. I can become that guide. I will become that guide. And in this way, our realization of emptiness serves as a powerful aid to develop our own love and compassion for others. And in the same way, our understanding of reality aids the development of the other 5 perfections as well, because of the great confidence, the strength of mind, that knowing that liberation is possible, we will wholeheartedly commit to generosity, ethics, and so forth.
Number sheba sheba mingzamo se mingzamo lai de deniji city tuyo de donda de chasama chasan sha yongro sha glo wat hago yongro de deniji yongro sambi dene go chike chasan ti ti yong dang an zhe da dongbani ma do ba yanza an mingzamo se de da chike mingzam re sambe ma da chik misi gi da an zhe ya chike chasan sha chik chowa chi le de je yonggo ma ra ine dang an Lamsa le to ke kili changi chen ko nyama gyune ko manyo a chebene te yar ko go ba de ko den re a de tingo so ya da ko yar ge ta ya ge shiro cha yong ro ba.
The sutra quotation we've looked at now over a number of sessions. Many of you, when you came to it and you read it, would have had perhaps a little meaning, but hopefully by now, that we've gone through it slowly, it will carry much more meaning for you. And if you've been, over these weeks that you've been looking at it, been reflecting on this meaning, reading these same words again and again, a deeper meaning will appear to you. And that will give you confidence as well, seeing how over a short period, through engaging in these meditations, one's mind is already changing. And reading words that before didn't mean so much, didn't have such an impact on our mind, now are. This will give us confidence that by continuing on this, transformation will come. Change will come.
나디네 시리부 디다데 베나 다 제자와 디게도 죄메게 다미스메도 사실은
Returning to the text, and now the last sentence in the sutra quotation. Shariputra, it is thus. Self, for example, is called self. Oh, no, just to say, I've changed the translation a little bit. Shariputra, it is thus. Self, for example, is called self. But this verbal expression, self, is not apprehended. So the last bit I just changed, but this verbal expression, self, is not apprehended.
당은 저기 다 제자와 디니 디게도 죄메게 다미스메 세대당 하나들이야 다 세대가 세다 최세 다 세대 간시는 롤파 나이도 다디 칸라에 마도 랑원이 주바 능고레스 나와 나신 아주 랑원이 주바 진제 안능아주 다 세대가 지게 다 세대 치고레스 다 세대 치고레스 진짜 당한테 들어와야 아주 랑 소소랑 삼단 소소랑 아주 나야디 강래와 랑원이 주바 능고레 나와 나신 진제는 지진데 anga 조구에 anga 직직에 anga 조구 anga 칼라세게서 시고로 받아 어디나심 다 세팅하서 나이도 강래와 랑원이 주바 능고레 나와 나신 알도 하라레스 비 짐바 한기지요 당 짐바딩 안 주기 삼단 하고 문하면서 하고에 매로 짐바 한기지요레스 제가 디네 진제 아니 맞아 다 세디 시고레디 이네 다 세팅아 조구지 죄메시 시고레 시고로와 이네 다디 나와 나신지 요말 믹스메도서 나와 나신 랑wen 주바 자와네 요말에 사실
This term self, or you could say I, or her, or him, appears to us as being truly existent, self-existent. In other words, that it exists precisely in the way that it appears, independent, unchanging. Self appears like this, and we grasp at it or apprehend it as existing precisely how it appears. Therefore, without any thought, we say, I am here, I am listening, I came here, I will go there, etc. This is something we give no thought to. We innately grasp that at objects, such as the self, that they exist in the way that they appear. We don't readily know that phenomena do not exist in the way they appear. In fact, we don't even readily recognize that we are grasping at phenomena as existing in the way they appear. And in fact, this first step of the meditation, recognizing how the self appears to us, takes quite some looking, because we are so deeply habituated to just grasping at phenomena as existing in the way they appear. But with analysis, with investigation, repeatedly over a sustained period, we come to recognize that the self, like all phenomena, does not exist in the way that it appears.
믹스메도 다 믹스메도스 믹스메도라면 아직 또나 믹스메도라도 제시로 지rin가르 제베나 다 세디 아즈레다 칼라마 랑고디 주바 나와나 진칭아도 다 세디 지도수슬라고레데 이내야 나와나 신제바제바이나 제바제바이나 루에 체메 또요 말에 체메 믹스메스 또요 말 나와나 신지 다선 제베세나 또요 말에서 대자 또요 말에서 동사치마도 이거 말에 체메 믹스메스데 미바선 수 체메 믹바서 체메 또요 말에서 체마디게 곧 나와나 신이 두개 미도 제바제데 체마디 마통화제 체마디 동사치마도 다리 나와나 신지 통고 말에서 믹스메스 통고 말에서 그래 도고 말에서 아니 가르도 오르세네 동사식만 두고 말했어요.
Looking at the final word here in the paragraph, apprehend, which would be more accurately translate as observe. So it would be but this verbal expression self is not observed. So the meaning is that we grasp at the self, like all phenomena, as existing in the way that it appears, but when we investigate, we find they do not exist in the way they appear. Never has the self or any phenomenon been found by a valid cognizer to exist in the way they appear to consciousness. Never has a valid cognizer found a self-existent object. Instead, one comes to recognize and eventually realize, even with a valid cognizer, that phenomena are empty of existing in the way they appear. The self is empty of existing in the way that they appear.
제네 니마서나 가능해서 동바에 매바다 하고 서로 와다 변에 먼저 잘라시는 강보지나 잘라네原来 제네 니는 니고고로 와다 잘라데 니마서 써야 사소라 니마서는 니마서는 아니 가능 통서는 가면 동바지 통서서 와다 동바 매바다 하고 서로 와다 잘라데 어디나데 잘라데 니마서 라면도 아니原来 니고고로 니마서 라로 와다 다 니마서는 디슈라 가르고고를 쓰네 매바 하고 소디나 잘라 매바 하고 소서 제가 디나지 곧 강라마도 랑원도 주변 나와나 신지 파일로파 제바 제디 니마소 통마소스다 다마노나 가르 통소라네 동사에 통소서 이거다 된다 지고래
If the self or any phenomenon existed in the way that it appears, it should be found. But when one searches, cannot find it. And this is why it's so important to do this meditation repeatedly over a sustained period. We need to keep looking. How does the self and other phenomena appear? Does it exist in this way or not? Because we are so strongly habituated to phenomena appearing, to existing in the way that they appear, we need to repeatedly recognize that they do not. To try and challenge this deep habituation to interacting with the world as existing in the way that it appears when it does not. And every time we look and we don't find, we are not observing the phenomenon as existing in the way that it appears, or as I previously translated it, not apprehending it as existing in the way that it appears. And in this way, we keep coming to realize, I do not exist in the way that I appear. This emotion doesn't exist in the way that appears. Enlightenment, wisdom, nothing exists in the way that it appears. So this would just be like if one was searching for something that you don't have. You would come to recognize eventually, it's nowhere. I've looked everywhere. It doesn't exist. So what we come here to recognize is that the self, every other phenomenon that we investigate, it's empty of existing in the way that it appears.
And Mishandagi, Kurati Jala Diwa Dinayo, Yomares, Kolamsa, Yomara touches her, Yomares. As a Cotzini, Manevaro, Manevas, Garahos, Dina the Meva Hagos or that. Just not that Meva Hagos, and Mishandagi, Suina, Yore, Yure, Yomares, Gedine, similar Damjalmason, Yomares, and Big Damjadi, Tembu Yoderwata, Tembucharua. Yomares, some Temburua. 심주지 약보를 한 먹은 미션다 이게 양게 제다 선은 양게 제가 줘야 내가 열어와. 제가 그 심주지 약보 제네 그 마동은 있잖아 통마송을 근데 다 디나한테 매바디 하고 살았다. 매바 하고 살아. 매바 하고 살아서 미전다게 열을럽나 요 말에서 타주마다 어디 유엔하면은 도고사에서 가요. 매바 타셔서 요 말에서 걸람사 그요 타치고로 봐. 디나시에 아주 강에마도 다세 랑원이 좀 나와 나시지 유미 제바치디 다데 마동와래다. 마동완사 랑원이 좀 매바 타고 그래. 매바 하고 살아서 그러니까 제만에 지 가른 나와서 나와든 자위네 요마라 선비게 삼로디 그디나 강아 지 레투고르 또 살아있나 마도 봐있나 아직 레투야 요마라 봐 대신 안 저기 잘라져야 지 바로 봐 그 매바 세부 하고 사나 마송네 세부 하선다 요마라 선비게 야바 딤불에 살아 봐 디나시리
If you've searched thoroughly for something, looked everywhere it could possibly be, and not just looked, but constantly thought, where is it? Where else could it be? You'll eventually come to the point, I don't have it. Perhaps I never had it, or I've lost it, whatever the circumstance may be. But you will have certainty you do not have it. And if someone were to come and say, have you got this thing? You'd say with certainty, no, I never had it, or I lost it. But you'd be certain. And if they were to say, have you looked there, have you tried this technique or done that, you would know, whatever you've tried everything, you do not have it. So here, there's no doubt, there's no wondering. Your mind is stable and unwavering. I've lost it, or I never had it. It doesn't exist for me. And this is because you've searched thoroughly. You thought about all the possible places it could be, and you've searched them all repeatedly. Then you know with confidence, you've lost it or you never had it. So here, we apply that process to come to understand reality, how phenomena appear, and then look for them. And do so repeatedly, with a wide range of phenomena, all times. What's appearing to my mind, does it exist in the way that it appears? Whatever you're thinking of, that's an object. Is what I'm thinking about, or does what I think about exist in the way that it appears? And you keep looking, object after object of thought, you recognize it doesn't exist. In this way, one starts to gain certainty that our objects of thought do not exist in the way they appear. And as we gain greater familiarity with this, whatever thoughts come to mind, whatever we are thinking about, they won't fool us. They won't have that same impact that they previously had, because we'll know that phenomena do not exist in the way they appear. So thank you. Then we'll conclude here tonight, and we'll continue after the quotation tomorrow. Thank you. But if you have questions, then feel free to ask. Yes?
What's the difference between merely knowing or merely apprehended and merely labeled? And in this case, does merely labeled just mean the verbal convention, or is there more to that?
So what is the difference between merely labeled? Mere knowing and mere experience, yeah. Those two terms. Yeah. What's the difference between them and merely labeled?
And merely labeled, does that only refer to the verbal convention, or is it?
And does merely labeled refer only to the verbal convention? Okay, thank you.
Kanila Pa Lu Pa Dapa Ming Das Lu Pa Dapa Samsa. She Dasamsa, the Pinana Delpa Jiki. That the Riksam Yongsam said Eugene Korongi when a Korong Morongi Yongsam, Korong Rashin to Shigorwa. That the Korong Sheba said, and to Kanichi Lagore Labiodu, you Koron Riksam Yongsam to your ass. Yongsam Dela and to get Shebas in loss and Mintagores, Ripa, Sherap said Mintagores. Tagores, Pa Tagores. Just Korongi, more the Sheba Korasia, the Ganachis, Ko Eugene, Corona, Corona, Eugene, Yonsam, Gior, Yonsam, Rixam, how godsam, how gorge your what, how gorge. And Delia, Sheba said Pachag, Tagores. Just Della. The Rixam Yonsam said Sheba Korong orders in the Siungure Sachi. The Lu Pa Da City, Delepa, Minji, Dele, Sheba said, Benanjugi. Minglima Jig di Hingdori Sadang, and di Jig Josere as a Dajoro, Dinaji, di Shebare, and di Anejig Ripari, says Palupa Tagorova, to the utilable Lupa means Tagorova. Then I to Tonga Ilishina that Dongsang how go them dirwa, how got them to how Dongsang, how go hunt you, how go did go Takara, did Della, and Anjugi don't want to be shut up, said Pa Mintago, Lupa, Della don't want to be shut race, Pa Tagora did the Ulisha, and Lush shut up race, Pa Mintagora. That the Shetan, the Takan Lodia, Yonsan Rivers in the Ray, in a whole deep calling Yonsam Shigoma, that the Garson, Sheva Horong said, don't buy you call Yonsam, how got some, how go hunt, go Rixam Joruba. Della and the Garda was don't want to be sheriffs in the Palupa, Shagores. Jadi Nidua, Yuchida, Shasa Yuchida, Shaka Lushinidua. Shakan. Palapkanjida, the Shakanjida, Shasa Yuchinidua. Tis a Yonsam Rixam said, you tasam Tasaki City. City. Delapa sharp said, Palupa, Dagore, such. And I was a bush gear, and the I mean, gear and the Giorvada, the daughter Giorvada. Deeply Shaban more the yoga, Delian means it, Dagorva. And deny he said that Sheba Koron said, don't want to be sheriff, the Koron, ranching don't be Dongsang, the Yonsam Ji did the Shiles. Delipa sheriffs in Mindago, Lupa Dagores. In the Lupa Daj, and I do see never Judia, sheriff said Jugorva, the sheriff kind of sheriff don't want to sheriff, Lagorva. Dina she the Da said that I do get da kind of by Lada, Lupa Dawa Jivarvada. Dina.
I'll answer the second question first because it's easier. This does merely labeled and this verbal expression. It comes down to the same thing, but verbal expressions explicitly refers to one's verbally labeling it, which would follow from mentally labeling it. But it comes down, because in your mind, you mentally label, right? But it comes down to the same thing. So occasionally one will verbally label something, but rather a lot, one is mentally label everything. Everything that appears is merely labeled by mind. And then sometimes we'll label verbally. But it comes down to the same thing. Then the first question about mere knowing and mere experience. So first, just to say as a translator, it's quite difficult for me to express what Genla is saying because it feels a bit inexpressible, but I will try. So first, one goes through the meditation and realizes emptiness. So when one realizes emptiness, there is a different word that is used for emptiness, which is translated as the mere empty state. So you realize emptiness, but what you're realizing is the mere empty state. So this this particular term is only used when emptiness is realized. So it's not used when one is talking about that phenomena are empty, or the emptiness of inherent existence. So it's a term only used whilst one is realizing emptiness. So this would be, the term then is the mere empty state. So this gives a feeling that one isn't yet, if it were a direct realization, aware that one is realizing emptiness. It's just all that appears is the mere empty state. So this is, when you realize emptiness directly, all that appears is the mere empty state. Thereafter, when one would then, as Gen has been saying for many years, one then recognizes the phenomena exists. Then it's not that they are non-existent, they exist as a dependent arising. But now, in between that, the realization of the mere empty state, and then bringing dependent arising in union or harmony with the realization of emptiness, one has this mere knowing, mere experience, or mere knowing and mere experience. In that, this is then referring to, so now one isn't recognizing the mere empty state, one is realizing emptiness. So, just a little bit after, and you're recognizing that the wisdom is a consciousness that is realizing the emptiness of inherent existence. So maybe not even all of that. There's mere knowing is an awareness, or being aware that there is a knower, a realizing, an active investigative consciousness that has known emptiness. And there's a mere experience, again, of what one is knowing. So what Gen is explaining, and I'm trying to get across, is that this is something very subtle, not like it's being presented here. It's very subtle. Whereas all these processes to analyze are coarser, and then there's an experience of this mere empty state. And thereafter, there's this mere knowing and mere experience. And then you'll recognize, and it only exists labeled by mind.
Is there a difference between experiencing the mere empty state and realizing emptiness?
Okay. Is there a difference between experiencing the mere empty state and experiencing emptiness and realizing emptiness? Okay. So these four terms all have the same meaning, but they are a different way of expressing this inexpressible experience. So, realizing emptiness, realizing the pure empty state, mere knowing, and mere experience. Those four terms, referring to the same thing, realizing emptiness. But these four different terms are used to describe differing aspects of that experience. Yeah? Okay. Good question. Okay. Thank you very much.